Avengers Endgame might have been a great movie and a satisfying conclusion to the events set in motion about a decade ago, but it was also very, very sad. We said goodbye to some great heroes, but wasn't necessarily goodbye for good for one of them. After all, we've seen plenty of characters make it back into the MCU so far, so is it really so crazy to think we haven't seen the last of Natasha Romanoff? We'll explain how the Black Widow could make a massive comeback. Going into Avengers Endgame, we knew the odds of us not saying goodbye to any of our heroes was slim to none. Longtime heroes like Steve Rogers and Tony Stark were pretty high on the list of people we expected not to survive the movie. After all, they'd each had a handful of solo films, they'd been in the MCU for quite a long time, and we'd gotten to see them fully develop their characters over the years. Then we have Natasha Romanoff, who, well, let's be honest, wasn't always handled the best. Actress Scarlett Johansson herself admits that when she showed up in Iron Man 2, she was little more than a torted-up secretary who also happened to assassinate people on the side. And really, in the first few movies, it seemed like nobody could agree on who Natasha was supposed to be or who she was romantically interested in for that matter. Natasha was one of the characters who survived the decimation of Infinity War, and things looked good for her at the beginning of Endgame. While the other original Avengers were off doing their own thing, Natasha was putting in the hours to keep the world safe. At that point, it was pretty clear Natasha had stepped up in a big way and was carrying the team. She even stepped up to recruit Clint Barton, who had gone all dark, weird, and brooding after losing his family in the decimation. Even War Machine didn't want to get involved with that creepy mess. So once Natasha gets everyone involved and back on track, it should have been her time to shine. But sadly, it was her time to die. Hey, don't blame us, we didn't write the script. Creepy Clint and Natasha get into an argument over who gets to sacrifice themselves for the Soul Stone, and Natasha wins. Well, by wins, we mean she gives up her life by jumping off a cliff, which isn't much of a prize if you ask us. Ultimately, the day was saved thanks in part to her heroic sacrifice, but it really seemed like she got a bum deal. I mean, this both in regard to the events of Endgame in particular and in the MCU in general. Some fans held out hope that Natasha would come back at the end of the movie, but clearly that didn't happen. The Bruce Banner Incredible Hulk combo claimed he had tried to bring her back when he undid the decimation, but it didn't work. Most of us shrugged our shoulders and decided that the standalone Black Widow movie must be a prequel, while also getting excited for Spider-Man Far From Home. But let's not count Black Widow entirely out just yet. After all, we did see another character come back from the dead in Endgame. Well, kind of. Gamora was an early casualty of Infinity War, but a version of her from the past traveled to the present along with Thanos and Nebula. So while she's still Gamora, she's a Gamora who has no memory of the events of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies or of Avengers Infinity War. Does this make her the same person? That's a philosophical question that we don't want to get into, because for once, let's focus on poor Natasha, who always gets pushed to the side, or off a cliff. Yeah, sorry. The reason we think Natasha might have a chance of rejoining the MCU has to do with the unique way she met her untimely end. She didn't just fall off any cliff. She sacrificed her life for the Soul Stone. As an Infinity Stone, it's obviously an immensely powerful object, but it's frankly the one we knew the least about, as far as the MCU is concerned. We had seen all of the other Infinity Stones in various movies except for this one. According to Thor, even the mighty Asgardians don't really know much about it, and his dad was making fake Infinity Gauntlets just to mess with us. But we do know that inside the Soul Stone is a pocket dimension called the Soul World. In the MCU, the Soul World contains souls, and whoever uses the stone can communicate with them. We saw this at the end of Infinity War when Thanos stands before a pale orange sky talking to a painfully cute little version of Gamora. If Natasha's soul is inside the Soul Stone, does this mean she could somehow be resurrected? We know Professor Hulk said he couldn't do it when he was undoing the decimation, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. We watched our heroes desperately try to piece together what they knew about the Infinity Stones, and it wasn't that much, no offense guys. And the Soul Stone was by far the one we knew the least about. So naturally, our heroes don't know much either. We don't even know how Gamora managed to track it down all the way to Vormir, but apparently it's not easy, since everyone wants it but nobody could find it. Even Red Skull only ended up there because of the whims of the Space Stone. Anyway, presumably, poor Natasha is inside the Soul Stone, and Professor Hulk couldn't bring her back. While he's a brilliant guy, he still doesn't know everything about the Infinity Stones. But there's another character who just might. There are many characters us comic book fans have been eager to see on the big screen for quite some time. And way up on that list is Adam Warlock, who has a special relationship with the Infinity Stones. We were teased with his reveal at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but that's pretty much it so far. James Gunn directed the first 2 Guardians movies, but was fired due to a series of offensive tweets he made in the past. Although Gunn apologized, Disney gave him the boot, and no other director wanted to step into his shoes and touch that project. Eventually, Disney rehired him and Guardians 3 is a go, which is great news. It also means there's a good chance Adam Warlock is finally going to be an important part in the MCU, and not just a tease. Okay, we know what you're thinking. Even if Adam Warlock does show up, the Infinity Stones are gone. Thanos destroyed them at the beginning of Endgame, and our heroes put them back in their respective places in time. So, with the time travel logic canon of the MCU, they should be destroyed. Well, not quite. The Russo brothers were asked if the Infinity Stones were really gone, and they said they've been reduced to an exceptionally base level, but they're not officially gone forever. For all intents and purposes, they are, but it certainly seems like they're leaving the door open for them to make another appearance in the MCU. Maybe they won't be as big of a deal as they were the first time around, but it certainly wouldn't be crazy for them to pop up again at some point. In the comic books, there's even a massive synthetic Soul Stone at one point that Thanos creates, because that couldn't possibly end terribly. Adam Warlock is able to destroy it, but has his own soul absorbed into the Soul Stone in the process, and it turns out that living in the Soul World isn't all that bad. He hangs around with Gamora and the other residents of the Soul World, and eventually he's joined by more heroes, including Drax the Destroyer and the Silver Surfer. Over time, Warlock was able to zap their souls out of the Soul Gem and into some conveniently unoccupied bodies in order to take on Thanos. He fuses with the Soul World and becomes an ultra-powerful supreme being, which is good news for all of his pals who'd been trapped there. But with great power comes great responsibility, and that's not just true for Spider-Man. It was decided that having all the Infinity Stones was too much power for any one being, so Adam Warlock entrusted different heroes with different Infinity Stones. Because he and the Soul Stone were so close, that was the one he chose to keep. Okay, it really does sound kind of weird now, but we promise he's a cool guy who just really likes this one magic rock. Would it be possible to have Adam Warlock get a proper introduction to the MCU without the Infinity Stones? Probably. I mean, Sony managed to put together a decent Venom movie without Spider-Man, so anything's possible. But the Infinity Stones, and the Soul Stone in particular, were a huge part of his story in the comics, so we think there's hope they could become relevant again. Because we know so little of the MCU version of the Soul Stone, and it has a connection with Adam Warlock, it seems like a prime candidate for making a reappearance. And if Warlock was able to get souls out of it once before in the comic books, then maybe Natasha isn't quite as trapped as we thought. How cool would it be to see Natasha Romanoff get out of the Soul Stone but not head back to her old life on Earth? She is a character with so much potential, and it seems like she never really got a chance to see it utilized in her old life. We know Marvel is planning on making a Black Widow movie, and all it took was Nat jumping off a cliff to finally get one. Even before we knew what happened to Natasha during Endgame, many fans predicted the movie would be a prequel focusing on her time in the Black Widow program before joining the Avengers. But honestly, it seems like the femme fatale story is one which has been done over and over and over again. We're tired of one-dimensional female characters, and it feels like it took Natasha a long time to break out of that mold. Giving her a prequel would be like making her one-dimensional again, and that would be pretty disappointing. In the comic books, she was even able to wield Mjolnir. Sure, it was in an alternate universe, but it was still pretty awesome. If Thor gets to go out on a fun outer space adventure with the Guardians of the Galaxy, why can't Natasha? According to Scarlett Johansson, much of Natasha's MCU story has been centered around the idea of redemption. She feels guilt for all of the terrible things she did when she was just following orders. In Captain America: Civil War, we saw her defying orders and doing what she believed to be right. Even in Endgame, she's still trying to pay her dues and make up for what she's done by being a hero and saving the day. Do we really want to think our hero redeemed herself by falling off a cliff? Does that really seem to be a fitting way for Natasha's story to end? Another option would be bringing Natasha back in a method similar to Gamora in Endgame. Now that time travel's a thing, it seems like anything's possible. And as per the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer, the Marvel multiverse is now totally a thing in the MCU, which we're super duper excited about. We'd love to see a different version of Natasha in the MCU, perhaps starring in her own movie, or maybe we're just going to get a standard prequel and we'll find out what really happened in Budapest with her and Clint Barton. Regardless, we need more Natasha in our lives, and we'd love to see more of her in the current day MCU. Well, what do you think about the idea that Natasha Romanoff might not really be gone for good? Is this just wishful thinking, or could we be onto something here? Let us know what you think in the comments section below, and then click on that subscribe button for more great videos from us here at CBR. See you next time.